For those of you just joining us, welcome to the newsroom at home. Some of you may recognize me from a little while ago. It's been a while since I've been on the screen, but for those of you who don't recognize me, my name is Charnel Ross, and I am the marketing manager here at Bay Area News Group. I do just want to give a quick reminder for those of you who have any questions, please go ahead and use that Q&A feature in your Zoom toolbar. And also, if you have any comments, feel free to leave those in the chat. Questions, we will try to get to those questions at the end of the conversation. And yeah, so let's go ahead and get started. Introducing our host for this session, Bay Area News Group's Pets and Wildlife columnist, Joan Morris.
Thanks, Charnel. And welcome everyone to this general session where we're talking about what went wrong in the garden. That's the feeling I always have when I go out and see like serious issues in my garden. So as Charnel said, I am the Pets and Wildlife columnist for the Bay Area News Group, and I'm also the garden writer. I was a garden editor a while back before I became the Pets and Wildlife columnist. And I did do the Master Gardener training, but I would not dare to call myself a Master Gardener because I don't do the volunteer work that these Master Gardeners do to earn those titles. But fortunately, I'm not a Master Gardener, but I know great Master Gardeners. And we have two of those with us here today. Janet Miller, who's a Contra Costa Master Gardener, and Laura Simpson, who is in Southern California, Master Gardener. So let's start, Janet, if you want to just introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, hi everybody, and thanks for being here. So Janet Miller, Contra Costa Master Gardener. I've been a Master Gardener since 2008. And I manage we have a really large demonstration edible garden in Walnut Creek that I manage. And by the way, we hold classes there every week, every Wednesday from 10 to 11, really great classes on all kinds of subjects. And those are free to the public, and you can come on down. That's on our website. If you Google Contra Costa Master Gardeners, you can find us there. And in addition to that, I also manage the propagation for our big tomato plant sale, where we produce about 40,000 seedlings of all different kinds of tomatoes, all different edible stuff for the summer garden. So all of that keeps me busy.
Great. Well, thank you for being here today.
You're welcome.
And Laura, why don't you introduce yourself?
I'm Laura Simpson. I've been a Master Gardener with Riverside County since 2003, I guess, long time. And I've been a Master Food Preserver through San Bernardino County since 2015. My husband and I live on just a average, like Southern California size lot, about 8,000 square feet. And we grow over 100 varieties of fruiting and flowering plants. We're mostly fruiting plants, a lot of edibles. So we have fruit trees, peaches, plums, apricots, abriums, a lot of citrus, and then of course a big vegetable garden and herb gardens. So yeah, we're pretty busy with that. So, and I also write the weekly gardening column for the Southern California News Group.
Yeah, we did pick that up many times up here. So I'm sure people are that read the paper are familiar with you as well.
Right.
So today we're going to talk about things that can go wrong in the vegetable garden, and the list is quite lengthy of what that can be. And even the most experienced gardener has issues at times. So it's important to find out, first cry and pull out your hair, and then you pull out your plants, and then figure out what is wrong and fix it for next year. They say to plant a garden is to believe in the future, and that's what we're doing. So we're going to continue with some questions that we had in the earlier session, and then get to the questions that I see are popping in now. And that's great. Keep them coming. So before time ran out earlier this morning, we were talking about zucchini and a Japanese eggplant that have not developed a broad, deep root structure, and what you could do to increase that root structure, or is it even necessary? I don't know. So, who wants to take that one?
Oh, I think we've grown a lot of eggplants and stuff. You know, eggplants, they don't really, I've never had them grow like a lot of roots. Like when you pull up your vegetables, it seems like there's a pretty good amount of roots. I mean, not a huge amount, but they do spread out pretty easily. But with eggplants, we haven't seen that. But you do want to have some decent root structure, because when it gets hot, you want it to be able to suck up the water from the soil. What I would recommend is like what you do with anything that you buy already started, and you pull it out of the pot, and of course it's going to have that little ball of roots. It's just kind of like tease them apart a little bit. I mean, don't rip it or anything, but just kind of gently tease them apart to kind of encourage them to spread. And then when you plant it, we get, it seems like as soon as we put the vegetables out, it's guaranteed it's going to get 100 degrees. So, but we put like mulch down, usually like grass clippings. So we'll spread those out, and kind of a nice fluffy layer. That keeps the ground surface cooler, and that encourages the roots to kind of go out too. If the ground is really hot, it's going to kill some of those tender young roots. So you want to protect that by mulching. And grass clippings are great because they break down. You don't have to remove them. You can, at the end of the season, they kind of melt into the soil, or you can dig them under. So, but it's a very effective mulch. But I must add that if you use feed and weed, or is that the grass fertilizer that has broadleaf herbicide, you know, to kill your weeds, don't use grass clippings. We learned the hard way.
I want to add to that, since you brought up the subject of mulching to keep the soil temperatures cool. We out at the demonstration garden, and actually at my own home vegetable garden, we've been using. I don't have enough grass clippings to use, and we don't have any out at the demo garden, so we've been using rice straw, and we've done some tests on soil temperatures, both testing the temperature of the unmulched area to the mulched area, and there can be a 30-degree swing in soil temperature. So
yeah,
that
makes a big difference.
It's a big difference, and really can make it especially on plants that are just getting established. And I agree, every time you plant seedlings, we have a heat wave. So you know, that just seems to be how that works. But the other thing I'll say about eggplants, because I grow a lot of eggplant, Japanese eggplants, or the Asian style eggplants, they just tend to be a little fussier than some of the other, like the Italian varieties. And so if you're having trouble with those, you might try some of the other, you know, some of the Italian varieties are kind of small and thin and tender, like have some of the features that we like about some of the Asian eggplants. So you might want to think about growing some different varieties that do better for you, if you're struggling with those in particular.
And Janet, I know we plant our tomatoes very deeply to develop root structure. Do you do that with the eggplant also?
Not so much. No, not so much. No, we pretty much the same soil level, or same soil line that they are in their pot when we move them up.
Yeah, tomatoes, if you notice the tomato stems, they have the little bumps all up and down the stem. Those little guys, when you put those in the ground, they develop roots. So that's why you would plant the tomatoes deeply. But the eggplants don't have that. So yeah.
I don't care for eggplants, so I don't grow it. Okay.
I hear that a lot. I hear that a lot, even out at the demo garden, because I will always want to put in 3 beds of eggplants.
Eggplant Parmesan, yeah.
But I am a recent convert to Brussels sprouts, but that's a different subject. Marilyn says that she has a tomato plant, Opaka variety. I'm not familiar with that one. that has lots of flowers but hasn't set any fruit. Flowers dry up and then they fall off, but not at the flower tip, but at the stem at the first joint. Any suggestions on what's up? And all the rest of her tomatoes are doing great.
You guys have been getting really hot weather up there, right?
Yep.
I mean, it's been very, very hot. A lot of plants will not set fruit when it's hot. I mean, tomatoes are a best known example, but also like we've noticed eggplants, peppers, a lot of plants will not fruit when it's over a certain temperature, like 90 degrees or something.
That's right.
So that's probably what's happening there.
Yeah, we had a question about this earlier, and generally that is the big cause of fruit drop or a flower drop, excuse me, is temperatures, and it's nighttime temperatures below 50 and daytime temperatures over 90, and eventually, and when the temperatures kind of come back down a bit, the plant will start setting fruit. So all you need to do is kind of wait it out. Yeah.
Are you familiar with this variety?
Opalka?
Yeah.
I am. Generally, we have grown it for our tomato sale. We've sold it. I've grown it out at the garden. I don't know anything specific about it that would say why that one is dropping and the others aren't. So.
Okay. Willard Sims asks, what is a good way to increase my vegetable plant yield? Kind of a generic question for you.
Yeah, that it's kind of going to be different depending on what the
depends on the vegetable.
It depends on the vegetable. One thing I will say is you want to make sure to give your plants enough room. So when you overcrowd them, and sunlight can't get in, like if you really pack your tomatoes in, you're thinking, I'm going to get a lot of yield because I'm going to plant a lot of plants. If you put them too close together and they can't get sunlight in, then they're just not going to fruit as much. So making sure your plants have enough room, that's a good place to start.
Yeah. I would say, and like you said, it depends on the vegetable. If you're growing chard or anything where you're eating the leaves, then giving it fertilizer, like nitrogen-rich fertilizer, is okay. But if you have tomatoes, be careful about giving them something like Miracle-Gro or anything rich in nitrogen. It's okay to maybe hit them early in the season to get them going, but don't keep doing that because you'll have a lush, beautiful, leafy green tomato forest with no fruit because it's putting all of its energy into producing all these beautiful leaves. And if you're growing spinach, that's okay. But if you're growing any fruiting type vegetables, then be careful with that fertilizer. Use compost or worm tea or something not quite so high octane, nothing quite as high nitrogen. So that's another a common mistake I've seen. So if your plants look gorgeous and lush but they're not producing, that's probably why.
Yeah. Absolutely. And we do recommend adding, as the summer goes on and you want your plants to, they still look good and they're still producing, might be slowing down a little bit. Add some compost, add some worm castings or worm tea, even doing that on a weekly basis, do a soil drench with some worm tea. That'll just, because they are using up the nutrients in your soil pretty fast, especially those big, those big fruiting plants. They're sucking that up. So getting some food to keep them, kind of get them over the finish, keep them going a little bit longer.
Come over the finish line, like you said.
Yeah.
Okay, Linda says, something is eating my beautiful tomatoes that are just now ripening. What can I do to prevent the loss of more? I really don't want to put out poison.
Good.
The tomatoes or the leaves?
She says they're beautiful tomatoes, and there's a problem. You don't know whether it's a rodent or a tomato hornworm that usually eats foliage, but that can, get part of it.
They'll bore into, the thing you can usually tell it's a tomato hornworm if it's eating the tomato because it poops and it leaves little black poops everywhere.
Yeah.
And it'll bore kind of into the tomato. The first thing she's got to do is really figure out what it is. Is it the squirrels or is it a rat or is it a possum or
mice?
Mice,
You know,
yeah.
also snails and things like that. I mean, if you have tomatoes that are sitting on the ground, then they're gonna, you know, the pill bugs and things like that are gonna start munching on them, and then mice will take little nibbles out of it. Rats will take a little bit bigger than nibbles,
Yep.
and of course bird pecks are gonna usually be from the top. So yeah, it's more
Yeah,
of
the
a
rats are
question
going to
of
leave a
observing.
little bit bigger hole.
Yeah.
If you suspect it's rats, trapping them is the thing to do. You want to set out traps. The challenge with that is that often what you're going to get is a bird rather than a rat. So we don't want that to happen. So what we've been doing is we'll set the trap, and then we take a milk crate, you know, the plastic milk crate, and we set it over the rat trap, and you know, where the handles are where you hold it is a hole big enough that the rat can easily get in.
How
And
clever.
and the birds don't get in that way, and we've caught lots of rats that way.
Oh, that's a good idea. I've not heard of that. I'll have to remember that.
Yeah.
It's and also that keeps the pets away too. Yeah. And with rat traps, you want to what you want to do is like leave the traps out, but not set, and then put the bait on there and get the rats comfortable. Rats are smart, and so if they see something new, they might be a little hesitant to go near it. But if you leave the rat trap with the bait on there, and then they see it as like, hey, this is where I can pick up some peanut butter, and then let them get a little complacent, and then set the trap. But yeah, they're smart. You have to trick them.
So the first step is to find out what is eating the tomato, and then you can figure out a
Yeah,
solution.
I mean,
Right.
if you suspect rats, and let me just say, if you have a compost pile, you probably have some rats. I mean, rats are everywhere, so that's always a good thing. I mean, a good guess. If it's tree squirrels, chances are you're going to see them, and often the tree squirrels will take the tomato off and run off with it. But so if you suspect it's rats, then you can go ahead and try. You know, set like Laura said, put the trap out, let the rat get used to it, you put some food on it, and then finally set it, and you'll know pretty quick whether or not it's a rat that's eating, because you'll either catch it or it'll set the trap off. Either way, you'll know.
And for goodness sakes, don't compost the rat once you've trapped it.
Exactly.
It doesn't go in the compost pile.
It's also helpful if you know when the fruit is disappearing. If it's disappearing at night, chances are it's a rat, or even the hornworm. During the day, it's less likely for rats to be out, although if they're hungry, they'll be out. So.
Also, raccoons are another one too. That the raccoons they come at night.
But I think they're generally going to take the tomato off the plant.
Yeah, they'll take the whole thing.
Yeah.
So
yeah. Okay. So we have a question that says, my tomatoes grow then start to rot on top. What is going on, and what soil amendments may I purchase to cure the problem? I think maybe they're talking about in blossom rot rather than something on top.
Because that's on the bottom. Blossom end rot is on the bottom. Did he say it's on the top? Or that person said it was on the top?
It's on the top.
Like cat facing kind of thing, maybe?
I don't know.
Which, I mean, that can be a water issue with cat facing, and typically if you grow smaller round tomatoes that aren't lobed, you have less issue with cat facing. So it could be a variety problem.
Right. Also, if they're sunburned, if they get sunburned, sometimes that flesh on the top gets damaged and can rot faster. So it could be that too. If it looks bleached out on the top, then that's likely sunburn.
Let's go. And so you would want to put some shade over then.
Yeah, you can use shade cloth, or that's when a little bit of nitrogen fertilizer might come in handy if your leaves are kind of sparse. I've seen it happen if we get hit with hornworms and you don't get to them right away, and you come out like a lot of your tomato leaves are gone, then it's okay to hit it with nitrogen fertilizer, because you want some leaf cover to protect the fruit. So, but
You
yeah,
just want to
probably
spend
shade
some
plus.
time hand picking all of those hornworms and getting rid of them.
That's what my kids used to do. They like to cut them in half. The kids are
They're
fascinated
so,
by
they
them.
ooze. It's terrible.
Well, the thing is, the front half is still eating, but the bottom half is gone. They just thought that was gross, but fascinating.
Okay, the next question is, I have a raised bed 4 by 4 by 1 in which I put new organic soil with castings, etc. I planted tomatoes, zucchini, and basil. I live in Concord, so it's scorching hot, so I put a shade structure over it to filter midday sun. I water every day in early morn or evening. Despite this, I got one small zucchini. My tomatoes are the size of golf balls, and the tomato plants are shriveled with curled leaves. This happens every year. What am I doing wrong?
Well,
Well,
if
yeah,
it's
go
only
ahead,
1
Laura.
foot wide, what was the
Foot deep.
dimensions
I
on
think
that?
she said foot deep.
4 by 4 by 1. I'm not sure what that equates to.
Okay, oh, it's so
4
maybe 1
feet
foot deep.
wide, 4 feet deep, and 1 foot high.
Ah, okay, okay. I was thinking 1 feet wide, like
Yeah,
if it
so
was
the
planted
first
along
question
it.
is, what have you loosened the soil? Because we're on heavy clay soil out in Concord. Have you loosened the soil before you put the new soil in, right? So how
Yeah.
hard is that soil down below? And has the soil been amended? You're saying year after year. Has they continued to amend the soil?
And she did say she puts worm castings in, so then is the question maybe of drainage, because that'll make everything go south fast if you don't have good drainage. I mean, you know, you do want to water them, but if the water doesn't drain away from the roots, then the roots are going to start to rot and the whole plant's going to decline, and that's going to be across the board. Everything's going to be.
Yeah, and again, so that could be a question of how, whether or not she did anything to the soil below before building that bed. And if it was just hard as a rock and may still be hard as a rock, then she's going to have a drainage issue for sure. And also, I'm curious about the shade structure over the top. You know, if that's done with shade cloth, generally it's probably around a 50% UV ray reduction, and that may not be totally to your advantage on the hot, you know, on the super hot days. It's nice to have that option of being able to, you know, maybe use some PVC and some shade cloth that you can use during a heat spell, but for the rest of the time they really want that sun. So
you
you
need
may be
6
cutting
hours
out
a
too
day.
much.
Yeah. If it's shade cloth, you can pull it away when
Yeah.
it's not so blisteringly bright out. But yes, there's any number of things that could be going on there.
But maybe start with rethinking that shade cover.
Yeah.
Get some more sun in there, because
you know, we've got we've got at least a week coming up here with fairly cool temps. It's a good time to pull that back and see if that helps.
yeah. Okay, this next question is from John. Says, I had good luck with tomatoes last year, but not good so far this year. Also having issues with zucchini and cucumber. They are on a drip irrigation system. Could it be I water too much or too little? So look into your crystal balls and figure out whether we don't know how much water that he's providing now, or how little.
Well, right there. So there could be any number of things going on. It could be soil fertility and maybe water. So the thing with watering, if your plants are established, you just want to make sure. I mean, you can test the soil. I like to use the soil probe that goes down and it pulls a core out so that you can see how far down your soil is damp. So if you're on your tomatoes, if it's dry in the top 2 inches, but it's damp down below that, then it's fine. If you probe down and it's dry all the way down, then it needs more water. So you can't really tell whether or not your plants are overwatered or underwatered just by looking at the surface of the soil. You really have to dig down and see.
And wilting happens whether they're dry or whether they're overwatered too. So that's a very important point, is you do have to dig down below. I mean, here we have like, it'll be dry on top and you'll get this nasty crust that kind of cracks and you think it's dry all the way down, but then yeah, you dig down the 2 inches and it's nice. It's just right, you know, so.
They might want to invest in a soil probe. I know they're a little expensive,
They are.
around 60.
Well, even just a little hand trowel should give
Yeah,
you
or
a good idea.
But
Yeah.
this is not a soil.
Actually, that is. You can use that.
Okay. We have a
Well,
question.
and you know what, Joan, just one more thing. The other thing they might want to invest in, because that's a very broad question, that things aren't doing well. They might want to do a soil test. I mean, you know, just kind of a general soil test to check for pH, to check for macronutrients, at least the NPK levels. I mean, just as a start. So
That's a good idea.
A good place to start, yeah.
yeah.
Okay, a question from Anne who says, aphids on green gauge plum tree right now. Shot them off with water, but it doesn't seem to do a thorough job. So how do you go about controlling the aphids on a plum tree?
Control the ants.
Mm-hmm.
If you have a lot of aphids, you probably have ants getting up in that tree. Aphids and ants have a symbiotic relationship. So the aphids, they suck the life out of your tree and they poop what's called honeydew, which is basically like sugar water. And the ants like to take the honeydew and they bring it back to their nest. And so what happens is when you have aphids, the ants will come in and they feed off the honeydew, but then they also will protect the aphids from any predator that wants to eat them. And there's a lot of other bugs that like to eat aphids because they're basically, I mean, they're like little Capri Suns of the insect world, right? They're just a soft, squishy bag of sweetness. Yeah, everyone wants to eat aphids, but the only thing that's keeping that from happening is the ants. And so what we'll do is we like using Tanglefoot, which you can get like in a tub. Usually, I haven't seen it at Home Depot, but like Armstrong's or any regular garden center should have it. And get yourself some gloves because the stuff will not come off your hands. We learned the hard way. But yeah, you want to wrap the trunk of the tree with, you know, an ace bandage or something to protect it. You don't want to put Tanglefoot directly on the bark. It will damage the bark. But wrap the tree, put the Tanglefoot on that wrapping, and it keeps the ants from getting into the tree. And then you might want to check and make sure the tree branches aren't touching a wall or another plant. You want to make sure that there's no other way for the ants to get into that tree. And right as soon as you can keep the ants out of that tree, you don't have to do another thing. I mean, lacewings, ladybugs, everyone will be coming in to eat those aphids. I had that happen with my rose bushes. We had to put granular ant bait down to get rid of the ants there. But within like 2 days, there was a cloud of hoverflies over all of my rose bushes. It was amazing. I mean, just like within a day or so, they were feasting, and no more aphids. So yeah, don't spray if you can help it. Don't use any insecticide. Try to find another way. That's another reason not to use insecticides.
Yep.
Okay, we have a question that says, what can damage a pear tree? It's a young tree. Most of the branches dried out. A couple of things, parts still there, shriveled. But at the same time, there's a couple of new healthy green branches that have appeared.
Fire blight.
Okay. Yeah, fire blight. You guys have it bad up there too.
Yeah. Oh, terrible.
Yeah.
And I mean, if you plant a pear tree, you can just count on it.
There's a few pear varieties. They're supposed to be fire blight resistant, but we still have a terrible problem with that. Yeah, fire blight it's a constant battle. It's spread by bees from one blossom to another. And so if one tree in your neighborhood has fire blight, and the bees will come in and they they spread it through the flower blossom. So what you'll see is it spreads from the tips and works its way down. Sometimes you can keep the tree alive by, you know, pruning off the damaged stuff. And I mean, fire blight, it looks like it's black. I mean, the wood, the leaves, it looks like somebody took a blowtorch to your tree. You can keep the tree going for at least a bit by pruning away the black stuff. But when you prune, make sure that you use like Lysol or something. Every time you cut, you want to spray your pruners with Lysol, and then cut again. Spray your pruners with Lysol, because you're going to be spreading it if you don't. But we found, like, if you have fire blight, just don't grow pears. It's heartbreaking, and
It is.
I've never had a tree just completely recover from fire blight. I don't know if you have at all, but
That's
yeah.
it. That's what we see here. Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
same thing. So sorry about that. To tell people it's a hopeless situation, but
Yeah. Sometimes you just can't grow everything you want to.
no.
Alice says, my tomatoes are doing so poorly this year. Lots of aphids, dying leaves. I've never had such bad luck in the raised beds. And the beds look bad with spider webs, dying plants, dry leaves. Where does she start?
Oh, she's got a lot of problems there.
Mhm.
The spider webs, that's spider mites. Right.
Yeah. So if they're raised beds, I'd go back to the soil for starters. If that's been a problem, if you've got plants that are just stressed out because they're not getting the nutrients that they need,
Yeah.
was the soil amended well, and was it left bare over the winter without a cover crop or anything growing on it, and then not amended well? That's probably a really rough way to start your summer garden.
Yeah. If they're overcrowded too, because a lot of those problems come from poor air circulation. And like you said, you don't want to try and, I mean, they look so cute, those little baby plants. You get them home from the nursery and you think you can plant them like 6 inches apart, but they get big. So, you know, it might be a question of poor air circulation. And also, like with tomatoes, you have those lower leaves that dry up and then they fall off. Well, take those out of there. You want to get rid of that leaf litter underneath. Put that, you know, throw it away or put it in your compost pile or something, but don't leave leaf litter underneath there, because that is a breeding ground for whiteflies especially. But
and then to go back to the idea of mulching, so that you're keeping soil temperatures cool, you're helping with water retention. And also you want to keep those lower leaves, especially of tomatoes, not dragging on the ground, so that if there's any kind of wilt or fungus in the soil, that's not coming back up to the plant from the soil.
right.
So mulching is really important in many ways there.
I wonder too if she's been rotating her crops and not growing tomatoes in the same place every year. That might be an issue for her this year.
Yeah, that would cause, well, there's disease questions, but usually if it's a disease issue, you're going to see like a wilt, verticillium wilt or something, where, like, you know, the plants will wilt before anything else. But it could be you want to rotate crops too, because of the nutrient factor that you're also replenishing, but still you want to rotate to let the plants take nutrients from different, you know, how do I put this? Some plants are heavier feeders than others. So, and I know, like, here with people having these little postage stamp size lots, they're kind of like, I can't rotate I only have one place to grow tomatoes. And in that case, you know, add the compost and just feed the soil. But yeah, if possible, rotate. But
yeah,
I've found it's not like totally critical.
Yeah, and it's hard to do in a small garden, but you know, it's really hard to do. So yeah, so doing all of the other things of feeding, mulching, amending the soil, mitigate those issues. Yeah.
Okay. Jeffrey says, I have 2 spindly tomato plants that are doing fine, but not very prolific. I neglected to fertilize. Is it too late?
No.
No, go ahead and
No.
fertilize. And you can use a granular organic fertilizer if you want. You can use worm castings, which are a great fertilizer.
Mm.
And you can do a tea, which is going to be a more diluted fertilizer. So you might want to use something a little more strong, using worm castings directly.
Yeah, it's when you have spindly, sad looking plants and there's not a disease problem, it's just that they're kind of sickly looking. That's okay to fertilize then.
Hungry.
Just don't keep fertilizing. Once they recover, stop.
Okay, Jerry says, I've had a nectarine tree that for 3 years has produced fruit that never matured. The fruit gets hard as rock. I've talked to the Master Garden horticulturist and he would like to see samples, but I haven't gotten to the office yet. Any thoughts on that?
That one, I don't know.
So does it drop the fruit before it's ripe, or?
It sounds like they're there, but they're small and hard. Is that a water issue?
It could be. I mean, usually if the tree is stressed in that way, it would just go ahead and drop the fruit. It normally doesn't keep the fruit on the tree small and hard. If he's not thinning, maybe the fruit is staying small, and then, if you've got like just a tiny amount of flesh around a full-size pick, that could be an issue. You always want to thin your fruit, because
And you always want to thin it more than you think you should.
Exactly. Right? Like about 75 to 80% of that fruit should be gone. You should have, 6 to 8 inches between each piece of fruit, because the tree only has so much energy to go around. So you don't want that energy put into, 1,000 fruit. And then, you're going to have a whole bunch of fruit that really stinks. But if you knock off most of the fruit, then all that energy is going to go into the fruit that's remaining, and they'll be better. So I wonder if it's a question of thinning, because that would result in the hard, small fruit. If not, because like I said, like the watering, it would just flat out drop the fruit. So I think that might be it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because nobody wants to thin.
But it's called tough love.
It is.
We have a question. Is there a soil testing lab in San Jose that they can get their soil tested?
There's a ton of soil labs all around. If you go onto the Contra Costa Master Gardener website, there's a whole list of soil labs that you can choose from. So, and generally you just mail your sample in. So you want to contact that lab, and oftentimes they may send you a package that you put your soil sample in, or they're going to give you instructions on how to take that sample. And you mail it off and they send you the results.
Nancy says, we had only 3 tomatoes on the plant. They were delicious, but we were expecting many more. Our plant needed to be watered every day because the leaves would curl up. Help.
So was the plant in a pot, or was it in the ground? And let me just say, for heirloom tomatoes, often they don't produce a lot. Those great big heirloom tomatoes that are so delicious. They're
like Brandywine.
Yeah, they're fabulous. But those 7 tomatoes are fabulous, but you're just not going to get a lot. So it may be a variety issue.
Yeah. Heirloom tomatoes are they're developed in a certain place. So heirlooms are generally specific to a certain location. And I see Brandywine sold here, but they're actually more adapted to like Pennsylvania and Ohio, which they have a shorter summer and they don't get the 110-degree weather like we do.
And they have a lot of humidity too, which is important.
Right. And so there's the heirloom, when it says heirloom, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to produce better for you. You know, you need to ask, like, where was this developed? You know. But that was our experience with the Brandywine tomatoes here. So we had, the plant looked pretty good, but we only got about 2 or 3 tomatoes off this big old plant, and that was why.
And again, I guess it could be the heat, the weather issue that they just didn't, it hasn't flowered yet, but as it cools down, maybe it will give some more tomatoes.
Yeah, if we're talking about this year so far, I mean, it's really early already for tomatoes. So if you're talking about this year's tomato plants, don't give up, because our big tomato production team area or time is later August and into September is when you really get the mother load of tomatoes. So it's still early on, and there's plenty of time
Yeah.
to produce.
So Hans says, my oregano plants have white spots on the leaves. What could it be? And what can I do to make them go away? And can I still eat my oregano?
Are the white spots moving?
We don't know.
Well, it could be scale. I've seen cottony cushion scale, or those fiddlebugs. They get on my herbs. They really like the rosemary, especially, but I've seen them on oregano too. It could be mildew.
It could be mildew. Yeah.
Yeah. So it all depends. I mean, you say white spots, you have to be a little bit more specific.
Yeah, you probably have to look at that under a loop or a magnifying glass of some sort, just to get a little more detail on that. The thing about oregano, most oreganos, you can cut them back hard and feed them a little bit and give them some water, and they'll don't overwater, but and you may be able to just get them past that, whatever is bothering them.
Yeah, my oregano gets like 6 feet across. I mean, it wants to take over the world. So
Right.
I don't know how it is up there, but
yeah, it can get that way up here too. So
yeah, it's a garden bug.
Yeah.
We have a question from David. He says, I have my garden in raised beds. I've been planting tomatoes in the same place for several years now. This year is the worst year ever for tomatoes. I took a cutting into Sloat where the gardener there diagnosed it as blight. Is there any way to get rid of blight or other soil diseases from the soil in his raised bed?
Well, so we talked about this earlier in the earlier session. We have had some issues out at the demo garden with verticillium wilt and a fungal disease, and we have had really good luck with treating the soil with actinidate. It's expensive, but what it sounds like is you need to rotate your plants and maybe give that soil a break for a couple of years. Maybe grow your plants in wine barrels or something in large pots for a couple of years to have because what you want is that population of those pathogens to get reduced. And when you put the plants in there, the tomatoes in there year after year, they thrive in that environment.
Yeah.
So,
have you ever tried solarization? Has that?
We have in other areas, and not for the same thing, but yeah, that's another possibility. But you really, if you're going to solarize, you got to do it in the heat of the summer. So you'd almost have to take those plants out and solarize it, do the solarization in August or something.
Yeah. See, right now would be perfect for us because it's 100 degrees.
Is it that hot today?
It's been in the high 90s lately. It's been miserable. So, yeah.
Okay. Timothy is growing Italian rib zucchini. They usually end up being deformed with smaller yellow tips and stunted growth.
So smaller yellow tips. Well, so sometimes with that tip thing is incomplete pollination. If you have the end of the zucchini not fully developed, that's often a pollination issue. It hasn't been fully pollinated. So again, you want to try and bring in those beneficial insects. The other thing I'm always looking for in zucchini plants, though, is Mosaic virus, which that can cause, what did he say? Is it they're bumpy? What were the symptoms again?
Deformed with smaller yellow tips and stunted.
Yeah, so sometimes if they're deformed, you've got some discoloration, they've got some bumps, maybe there's some modeling of the skin. That's an indication of a mosaic virus, of a zucchini mosaic virus, which is very, very common. And the thing is, if you have that, you want the following years, you want to grow resistant varieties.
Right. You probably just want to pull that plant out then,
Mhm.
you know, if it's the mosaic virus, because there's no cure for that.
Okay, how do you fix blossom end rot in tomatoes and peppers?
So, well, first of all, the one thing I would say is blossom end rot tends to affect Roma tomatoes more than any other kind of tomato. So I almost stopped growing Romas because of blossom end rot, but then I found a variety that's pretty resistant to it, and I do pretty darn well with it. So if it's mostly aromas, you may just not be able to grow those, your regular old San Marzanos that we all love. I can't grow them. I get blossom end rot on them. So it is so you might want to start with variety and type in general, right?
Yeah. And then watering too is another thing. It's irregular watering. You want to make sure that it gets regular water, not too much, not too little. I know it's kind of like
and on a regular schedule.
Yeah. And then a lot of people have their vegetable gardens on a drip system that's automated. But if you get hit with a heat wave, you want to make sure you do that supplemental watering and water it in the morning, so it has a chance to, trickle down into the root area. So that's another thing.
I mean, it is generally it's a calcium uptake problem. And so,
right.
but it's rarely an issue of not having enough calcium in the soil.
Right.
It's generally more of a problem with the water imbalance.
Right. Because some people said, "Oh, put like crushed eggshells in there," but that doesn't really work. Yeah.
No, it takes a few years before those eggshells are broken down enough that those plants can absorb. Yeah.
True.
Okay, Tony says, I have powdery mildew on my Swiss chard and calendula. What's the best resolution?
So we see calendula, and this time of year, I just cut the calendula down. It's kind of done. I mean, it's been blooming, and now it's an annual, right? And it's past its blooming period, and it's got powdery mildew, which it's always going to do this time of year. Cut it down, and it's going to have reseeded everywhere, and if you want that, you can even take some seeds and strew them around. You'll have lots more calendula when it comes time for its season next year. And here, and Laura, this may be the same for you. With Swiss chard, you get powdery mildew on it this time of year. It's stressed out from the heat. It's a cool way.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, and you just pull the leaves off that are affected. Now, we have a terrible problem here with powdery mildew on cucumbers and squash, where it gets hit and those leaves, they'll fold, they'll shrivel up, and then they have powder on them. And if you have that problem, I mean, with chard, you don't want to do this because you eat the leaves, but with squash and cucumbers, what you can use is a sulfur spray. It's considered organic. It smells to high heaven, but you spray the leaves like about every week. You want to go out there and spray the leaves to keep that powdery mildew at bay. But don't make the mistake I did of leaving the bottle out on your patio at night, because the raccoons could smell that sulfur. It smelled like something rotting inside that bottle, and they wanted that. So I came out one morning and my bottle had teeth marks in it. It was like knocked down.
They thought it was rotten eggs.
Yeah, they're like, something's dead in here. We want this. I'm like, what the heck? Who ate this?
Wow.
And it was the raccoon. There was a trash panda. So if you do go that route, put the bottle in your garage away. Don't be lazy like I was.
So, I'll add one more thing to the powdery mildew thing. What I find with he said calendula and squash, right? Were those the two things that were affected?
Swiss chard and
The
Swiss chard and calendula, yeah.
Okay. Well, since we're on the subject, I'll just mention about squash. For us up here, eventually all of the squash gets powdery mildew. I mean, but it'll produce for a nice long period of time. Then it starts to get powdery mildew. The production slows way down. And so what I do is we pull it and we'll plant another squash plant. We'll just replace that plant because it tends to resist it pretty darn well in the early stages of the plant. And it just tends to get it at the very last stage. So if it's got, because if it's got it, you've already gotten a lot of squash out, you ain't getting plant another one.
Yeah, take advantage of that long growing season.
Yeah.
They don't have that on the East Coast, so.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
Okay, Jeffrey says after getting 4 to 5 artichokes, his plant seems done. Is this normal? Temperatures have been in the 80s here.
Yep. Do you want to go, Laura? Or?
We've not grown artichokes, but that seems like a decent amount. I mean, the artichokes take up a lot of real estate, and we don't.
They do take up a lot of real estate, and they can produce a lot more than that. But it also is going to depend on the variety of artichoke that you grow. But that first crop, and it also depends on how old your plant is. So if it's a first year plant and you got 4 or 5, you're good. And then what happens is that once you're through that spring flush of artichokes, you're going to cut the plant down all the way just above the crown. So cut it all the way down. You're going to see leaves come back, and you're probably going to get a few more artichokes in the fall. They won't be quite as good, but you'll get one more little round of it. And again, when they're done, cut it down and cut it just above the crown, and it'll just keep coming back. You should get more and more artichokes each year. So they they don't last forever, but you should be able to get 3, 4, 5 years out of an artichoke plant and continue to produce. I've had the artichokes plants produce, I don't know, 30 or 40 artichokes in in the spring, in that first spring, or not in the first spring, but in the spring season.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
I just buy them at Trader Joe's in the bag. It's too much work.
That's the easy way. We have a question that says, one of my cucumber plants is producing a very bitter cucumber. What is the problem here?
Variety, maybe.
Yeah, if it's a volunteer, it might be something that was cross-pollinated, and
it just might normally be bitter. There's nothing that, like in the watering or sun or fertilization or anything.
If it's otherwise healthy, there are some cucumbers that are really quite bitter, and then also it depends. Some people taste bitter more than others do. So like sometimes the skin of some varieties of cucumbers will be bitter to me, but not to my husband. So it may be that too.
And when you look for varieties, you can look for non-bitter varieties, and there's lots of those. Yeah. I just noticed a question pop back up about that artichoke question, and the person said, what is the crown of the artichoke plant? So I just want to clarify. So all that is you're cutting it down just not to the soil level, but just above where the plant comes out of the ground, and you don't want to start cutting into the root at all. So that's going to be 2 or 3, maybe 4 inches up off the ground. So that crown is just right there where all of the leaves come out at the base. So maybe we call it the base of it.
Yeah.
Okay. Linda asked, how often do you fertilize tomatoes and zucchini?
Maybe once or twice, really early, and that's it. Like I said, you don't want to over fertilize, because you want the plant to produce fruit, not leaves. So unless you're seeing an obvious sign of a nutritional deficiency, just hold off on fertilizing.
Yeah.
And then you
And
can
well, and
also
the other, if they've slowed down a little bit and you still got all of August to go, if you want to, again, if you want to add some worm castings or some compost, you know, you can give them a little bit of extra vigor for that last stretch.
Yeah. Yeah, but just a bit.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, Maria asked, any chance a plant can recover from a spider mite attack on tomatoes and squash?
Depends how bad it is. If you've sprayed and gotten rid of the spider mites, you know, if you caught it early, then it'll probably be okay. It will probably recover. But if the plant is just like totally infested and all the leaves are affected, then I would just pull the whole plant out and start over from scratch.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But if you have sprayed, you want to cut off those bottom leaves and get rid of any of the, as much as you can. Because typically with spider mites, it starts at the bottom, they crawl up, and so
Yeah.
those bottom leaves, if you can get rid of all of the yellowed, dead, dying ones, and see if you can keep the upper plant uninfected.
Yeah.
Okay, I think we have time maybe for one or two more questions. And here's one that says, how do you get rid of apple worm?
The coddling moths. No commercial apples. I mean, well, occasionally do this, but almost all commercial apples are grown. You have to spray. If you have a real bad problem with codling moths, you can use there's like these decoy apples you can get that you put like a sticky, almost like that tanglefoot stuff. You can spread it over there and have it be a decoy apple, and then the moths will come in and get stuck to it. But for the most part, whenever we grow our own apples, we don't bite into it. We don't bite into it like out there. We cut it in half to make sure there's nobody in there, because it's a very common, it's a common thing, and it's something that's very hard to control. And they like to come in through the blossom end, so you don't always see the hole, but then you bite in, it's like, oh, hello. So yeah, it's really hard to just completely eliminate those.
For tomato plants, what's the difference between fish emulsion and fish fertilizer?
Well, for starters, fish emulsion is usually going to be liquid, and fish fertilizer is probably dry, granular.
Yeah, but they both stink to high heaven.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I mean, they should probably be delivering about the same nutrients.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have to get in a dig against cilantro.
You don't like eggplant or cilantro?
Yes, I always bash it whenever I have a chance. This person says, I have not had much success in growing cilantro from seeds. What should I be doing, and when should I be planting seeds?
Early.
It's a cool weather crop. We always think about cilantro to go with our tomatoes and jalapenos in salsa, right?
Right.
It's a cool weather crop. It'll go to seed really, really quickly in the heat.
And you can reseed it, you know, but what I found is if you try to plant it like now or June, you know, you plant it and it bolts as soon as it comes up. It seems just, you know, a few leaves and then boop, it bolts. So yeah.
It's a great thing to grow in the fall and in the early spring.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's real hard to grow in the summer. Okay, so this will be our last question. It's from Naomi in West County. Last year, my early girl tomatoes would not ripen. This year, my stupid, sorry, not Italian, and Bloody Butcher have lots of tomatoes that are also very slow to ripen. Weather has been windy and colder than usual. Anything I can do to encourage ripening despite the cooler weather?
That's hard. West County's cooler, but you did pick some good varieties for West County. So both are early girl and peaches should ripen for you. I mean, it's early. Don't forget, it's still early. Except you know, July and August are you know, August and even into September are really our good days. I'm not sure there's much you can do if you've got planted them in the sunniest place you have. You might create a little windbreak if you can do that without casting a shadow. But that's going to help the plant. It may not help it probably won't change much in terms of the ripening time.
Okay. Well, great. We
Can I
have,
throw one quick thing in? It'll take me about 20 seconds because I saw a question pop up. It said, what's the difference between mulch and compost? And I just want to answer that question for you guys really quickly. Mulch is anything that you put on the top of the soil. Compost is something that you're going to work into the soil, and that's generally as food, as a fertility thing. And the question was also, can compost be mulch? And the answer to that is yes. So anything that you put on the top is mulch.
Yeah.
okay. Well, great. We had so many questions that we weren't able to get to, but I'm hoping someone has saved all of them for me, and I'll try to write some columns on stories that answer the questions we didn't get to. And I want to wish everyone good luck on their gardens as we continue on. And thank you so much, Janet and Laura, for being here and sharing your knowledge and expertise.
You're welcome.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks for having us. Nice to meet you, Laura.
Oh, nice to meet you too, Janet.
And I'm
even virtually here.
Yeah,
turning it back to Charnel.
All right, thank you, Joan. And thank you everyone for joining us for this webinar session. If you are looking for your local master gardener, you can visit these links that you see on the screen right now: Contra Costa County, Alameda County, Santa Clara County, and Marin County. We did drop those in the chat, so you do have those links available. Also want to remind you of upcoming events that we have going on. Our next Flora and Fauna episode will be on August 19th, and it'll be on wildfire gardening. So, you know, we are coming up on our fire season, so that'll be a good one to kind of look out for. And then also other topics we have is our bookish series that we have going on with our sister company in Southern California. That episode will be airing tomorrow, and it'll be on best-selling authors. And then lastly, if you guys have any suggestions or any ideas, topics that you want us to talk about, please go ahead and send us an email at theevents@bayareanewsgroup.com.